My KPI is paid subscribers. And so when I have that North Star metric, I can go back and look at my goal is ideally what I've learned with paid subscriptions is that people want to subscribe to stuff that they can't get somewhere else. They can't get via Google search. They can't get via ChatGPT. And so that's my goal. My life there was it was roughly 60 hours a week. 7 days a week kind of work. I have to respond to Slack messages and emails on Saturday and Sunday. It's not right away, but nowadays I can press send on a post and money will
Yeah.
come in my pocket that second.
Welcome to Who Invited Marketing, the podcast that gives marketers the inside scoop on how to level up and stand out. My today's guest is Aakash Gupta. Aakash is a product manager who runs Product Growth, a newsletter with over 170,000 subscribers and an awesome podcast for product managers. He has previously been VP Product at Apollo, Head of Product at Affirm, Lead Product Manager at Epic Games. In this episode, we talk about how he grew his newsletter to 170,000 subscribers, what is his creative process, popular terms like PMF and Agile, how should product marketing work with product, how has marketing messaging changed the way product thinks, questions marketers should ask product, and so much more. But before we get into the good stuff, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Spotify, drop a rating. It helps more marketers like you find these game-changing insights. Here's presenting Aakash Gupta. Hi Aakash, welcome to Who Invited Marketing. You have 250k followers on LinkedIn, 166k newsletter subscribers, and now you run a podcast where you have interviewed some incredible product managers. One question, how did it all start?
Yeah, so like many people, I spent probably 12 years of my career focused heads down on my career, working whether as a founder or as a product manager, eventually a director of growth. And COVID happened. And probably so many people can relate. Uh, COVID gave me more time. I had just as a factor of not driving to and from work, I had an extra hour a day. But also by not having all those water cooler conversations and people walking up to my desk, I was more productive and found myself having hours more time a day and nobody to go see in terms of outside of my house. And so with all that time, I decided, one of the things I used to do internally when I was at Epic Games was I used to run a Slack channel called Gaming Industry News. And I used to post a lot of things about the gaming industry. So that's actually where my public content career started. The Slack channel died down as COVID happened. So I posted one post on LinkedIn and immediately got a lot of engagement. And so that really kicked off my content flywheel.
Amazing. So after LinkedIn, you started your newsletter, is that right?
So LinkedIn happened for a long time before the newsletter, and even Twitter presence happened before that. So yeah, I started with social media and then moved into the newsletter.
And how many years has it been now running the newsletter?
The newsletter started in, I believe, 2021. So it'd be like 3.5 years.
Amazing, amazing. So, as we discussed, you run a very successful newsletter and also a podcast. If someone wants to start writing one today, where should they begin?
So I think the beginning seedlings are to think about what is going to get me excited to post. Because the biggest barrier you face from day one is what are my colleagues going to think about this? What are my connections on LinkedIn going to think about this? Is this going to make me look bad? And so, whatever you can to get started, it's then when you want to start to experiment with what am I writing about? That is not what I focus on writing about these days. And so, you might eventually find your voice, but the key is to get over that initial hump that we all have. And you'll still have it even today. I still have it like, oh, what are people going to think about this potential post? So it never really goes away. And so it's just something you need to learn to live with.
And that's really incredible. But I want to dig a little deeper into your process. So, do you use a content backlog thing? What are the prioritization methods that you use, you being a PM? And what's your system in general?
Yeah, so being a PM, I mainly look at like the data of what is moving my key performance indicator. So for me, paid subscribers to my newsletter. That is my number one KPI. And so having that North Star metric very clear in my mind, it is not free subscribers to the newsletter, which is 166,000 you mentioned. It is not LinkedIn followers, which is 250,000 you mentioned. My KPI is paid subscribers. And so when I have that North Star metric, I can go back and look at every post I've ever shipped and say, okay, what were the drivers of this? What types of topics? How timely were they? Was it about PM? Was it about careers? Was it about job searching? And so my newsletter content calendar is what I think of as my primary product. And so that is a spreadsheet I have, which is all of the newsletter posts that I have coming up in the days they're going to be published. And so I really maniacally look at that calendar and I look at the data of what's working most recently to drive those paid subscriptions because I want to continue to grow the newsletter. So that is my entire system where my newsletter becomes the hub. And then once I write a really good newsletter article, those are usually like 5,000 words. It's very easy for me to take 3 or 4 social posts out of that newsletter article because a newsletter article might have 11 or 12 points I make. The social post might be 3 or 4 of those.
Both of them are like super deep dive. Even your posts, even one single picture, it shows that you have researched so much. And of course, the newsletter is amazing as well.
Thank you. That's my goal is ideally what I've learned with paid subscriptions is that people want to subscribe to stuff that they can't get somewhere else. They can't get via Google search. They can't get via ChatGPT. And so that's my goal.
So I'm curious to know, what does your content MVP look like? Is it a sentence? Is it a sketch?
So for me, it's a title. And then when it comes to a podcast, it's a title and a thumbnail. And so I'm trying to think about very much like Mr. Beast or somebody like that. Like, what is this all about? And so that newsletter calendar that is the most important sort of spreadsheet in my business, it's just a series of titles. So upcoming next, I have how product board grows. So how did I decide on that? Right? I looked at, okay, I have this series of company deep dives. Those tend to do extremely well for me. And so what products have nobody else really done a deep dive on? So product board actually has 5,500 customers. People like Salesforce use it to organize their product teams. So nobody's written about it. It seems like an important company. It's worth $1.7 billion. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a deep dive on that. And so once I have the title, then I go out and do my research. So for me, the research with Product Board was I interviewed their CEO, I interviewed their senior director of product marketing, I interviewed their senior director of product management, their VP of product management, a product manager, and their director of product design. So I got in contact with all those people. I had a 30-minute chat with all of them. And then I go into the writing phase. So that's my typical process.
So you were a full-time PM and now you're a content creator. How's the shift been like for you?
Awesome. Great. I think that where I actually left in my career as a product manager was as a VP of product. And what I found in my life there was it was roughly 60 hours a week, 7 days a week kind of work. I have to respond to Slack messages and emails on Saturday and Sunday. And ideally, I have to be doing a little bit of deep work on Sunday evening just to stay afloat compared to the other VPs because that was a $2.5 billion company. And then on top of that, you're working for somebody. So they're determining, I remember like I wanted to go 1 week trip with my family in a remote part of North Carolina where I live called Asheville. And I booked the trip, everybody okayed the vacations, and it just happened that the way our company set up our product planning process, that week was one of the most important weeks of product planning. So I ended up working basically the whole week, right? And so somebody else controlled my life because I was VP of product and product planning was that week. So that's just how it goes sometimes. And so for me now in this new life, full control over my schedule, that's one thing. And then the second thing, which I think is probably the most exciting part about it, and I think I was talking to my family about this earlier, like, they're like, "Oh, like did you know that like if you became a S corp, you could like save on these taxes compared to being an LLC and stuff like that? And I was like, guys, like I can spend my time improving my costs or improving my revenue, but if I just work more. And so that's the coolest thing about it. Unlike being an employee where you need to do well on the performance review, and then finally when they look at the raises, then you get your raise. For me, it's like if I do some good work, if I release a really good post, I see the benefits right away.
Yeah, but it's not right away, right? Because you have put in a lot of hard work before that. You've built an audience and you've been really consistent. So it's not right away. It is
Yeah, in
like a
terms
lot
of
of
making
years.
money online, it's not right away, but nowadays I can press send on a post and money will
Yeah.
come in my pocket that second. So if I can
Yeah.
increase the quality of that post, it has a huge impact.
Plus, I think as a podcaster, for me, the best part is I get to talk to like brilliant, smart people like you. And, it's that's the work, you know. It's so fun to talk to people who are genuinely smart and interesting conversations, and you're recording it.
Yeah, it's a little bit less stressful than a product review meeting.
Okay. So, my next question is, what tools are in your content stack right now?
Yeah, so tool-wise, for me, the most important tools for editing the podcast, Adobe After Effects and Premiere Pro, for recording the podcast of Riverside, for writing the newsletter, it's hosted on Substack. Obviously, I use LinkedIn, and to manage across all my LinkedIn and Twitter, etc., I also use a tool called Buffer. Those are like the main things that I'm paying for these days. At the operating system center of my entire business is Notion, so I have a paid seat to Notion as well. But otherwise, I really try to keep my fixed costs low. I guess the final thing is I pay for like a Google OneDrive so that I can keep all the backup recordings of my podcast as well.
Amazing, short, and really simple. So, let's take a trip down cringe lane. What are the mistakes you made in your first 10 posts that you are never making again?
Yeah, there's so many mistakes, right? That we all make. And I think that that's the beauty of it being your first 10 posts. They're gonna be your 10 posts that are viewed the least, hopefully, if you do things right. So if I look back at my first 10 posts, interestingly, my strategy was to write like an in-depth article on my blog, and then I would post a link post to that on LinkedIn. And so some of the mistakes that I made, one of the first things I did was I didn't understand the bar for like a really good blog post. I would just like write like, like 1,000 words, maybe have an image or two that I copied from somewhere else and put that into the blog. And I quickly realized, okay, no, you need to be doing quite a bit of serious analysis, maybe creating your own infographics, creating your own images to make a blog post something that people actually want to click into. So that was one key learning. A second key learning, and I think everybody probably faces this if they ever post on LinkedIn, is master the hook, right? I found that I could spend 10 hours on a post and then I spend 10 seconds on the hook and it totally fails. On another post, I'll spend 10 minutes on the post, but 10 minutes on the hook, and it does really well. And so I started to shift that allocation of my time to say, okay, yes, you need to have an awesome blog post behind this, but at the same time, you need to have an awesome hook. And so I might spend 10 hours on the blog post and an hour on the hook just to actually get the distribution. And so that's the other sort of key lesson for me from the early days.
So, what's your process for getting the right hook now, or you have mastered it all?
I haven't mastered the hook, to be honest. I consistently, as I publish a post, even these days, I know within the first 10 minutes how it's performing. So if it isn't a hook that's performing, I might go back to another hook that I had in my sort of rotation of ones as I was moving at the final minute. But my typical hook process will look something like I draft the entire post, let's say 10 hours I work on the post with one hook in mind, right? And so I think that's my main candidate hook. And then I go into, I'll usually ask ChatGPT, Grok, and Claude, all three of them. Give me 10 different hooks for this post. It needs to be a one-liner hook. It needs to use really strong copywriting principles, and it needs to encourage people to hit the show more button, right? I'll use that prompt in all three of them, and I'll look at the 30 examples they have, Usually I'll like maybe 3 or 4 of them, but I'll always have a rewording. So I'll reword those and I'll put those into a document. Then I'll start to edit, choose between the few. What I'll do is I'll realize that the hook also informs what the rehook looks like in line 2. And it also informs what the post structure looks like. So as I get it down to like my top 2, I'll basically edit the post to take a look at visually how each post looks under the 2 hooks. And then I'll say, okay, this is the hook that makes sense. Then I'll finally put it into this app called Clio, Kleo. It's a Chrome extension. It'll allow me to see what the hook looks like on mobile, on desktop, on tablet view before the show more button. And then I'll make final tweaks based on that. And then I'll post it.
You do this for every post?
Generally, yeah. The less time I spend on the hook, usually the worse the post does.
Yeah. But that's amazing, the kind of work you put into every post. I knew your blog, your newsletter is hard work because of all the deep dives, but I didn't know that even a single post you're testing hooks. So that's a great tip. So PM can sound super complex. Now, obviously, I totally understand it because I never Googled scope creep in a meeting, and I'm joking. But for marketers who maybe aren't as PM fluent, can you demystify some of the terms?
Yeah, so in product management, you're going to hit like a couple different terms. I think the first most noteworthy term to come out of product management is product market fit. What is this, right? It's really important for marketers because they're determining the market part of product market fit. And so product market fit, I think the best way to think about it is that people who are using your product are naturally going out and recommending it to other people. And when you're going in to sell your product, if you're doing a B2B sales process, you have a win rate of above 25%. And if you're a consumer product, your LTV is higher than your CAC, right? So as you start to hit that broad principle and then these metrics, whether you're B2B or you're B2C, this gives you a really good signal of whether you have product market fit. And once you have product market fit, for product managers, they say, okay, marketers, you can go ahead and step on the gas. You can go ahead and spend a lot of money on marketing. Now we actually know that that money is going to return back something that makes sense. It's not going to go into a leaky bucket. So product market fit, first concept. The second concept you're going to hear from PMs a lot is prioritization. And they're going to talk about roadmap prioritization. And why do PMs care so much about roadmap prioritization? So basically, if you're a marketer, suddenly you're going to have some great idea for the product. You're going to run over to your product manager and you're going to say, oh, this is this beautiful thing. Our really big customer wants it. I read a lot of reviews online. Here's some evidence that I was talking to somebody about this. We need to build this. Can we please build this? And they're going to say, oh, we already have like our roadmap planned, but this didn't make it into the prioritization. And the thing is, marketers are not the only people who have a bunch of requests for the product engineering and design teams. And so what the product management team is trying to do is shield the design and engineering team from having to service all those requests, and instead, over some cadence, whether it's monthly, quarterly, yearly, whatever it might be, try to collect that feedback from marketing, from customer success, from sales, from support, from executives who tend to drive a lot of it, and get all that feedback into one place. Then they'll prioritize their roadmap. And so that's the second thing that you're going to hear a lot of product managers talk about. The third thing you're going to hear PMs talk about is, hey, can you put that into the PRD, product requirements document? So product requirements documents, they're kind of the handoff point from marketing, sales, executive, translated with the PM and designer to engineers. So when you're about to ship something off to engineering, it suddenly becomes very expensive. If you look at any tech company, they spend the most money on software engineers. And so you want to make sure that software engineers are shipping things that are going to have a high impact. And so the product requirements document is where you eventually collect, hey, this is what the design is going to look like. This is what this product feature is going to do. This is our hypothesis for what metrics we're going to move. If it moves these metrics, we'll consider this experiment a success. If it doesn't move these metrics, we will not ship this. And so the product requirements document is this very important document. And if you want to work with a PM, a hot tip as a marketer, help them write the PRD for the feature you want. So those would be 3 of the concepts that I'd highlight.
But I have one more. Can you simplify what is agile and waterfall?
Yeah, so agile and waterfall, basically, if you think about Microsoft Windows, 1995, 1998, 2000. What's going on, right? They're taking like 2 to 3 years to build a product. They're going to build that product. They're going to test it. Why are they going to test it a lot? Because they're going to ship it to you on a CD. Unlike the internet or the web, they can't just update it, right? Once they ship it to you. So the waterfall process was born out of those constraints. Hey, we're going to have a big marketing event. We're going to spend $500 million on selling Windows 95 in that year. We're going to write CDs, like 25 million CDs we're going to sell that year, right? And so the waterfall process was all about, let's plan out everything we want to have in Windows 95, in Windows 98, every user story. Let's have every test case mapped out. And then let's, like waterfall, check off all the boxes of everything we need to build. What ended up happening is in the internet, you can literally ship thousands of updates a day, right? That's literally what Facebook and Meta do. And so in this new world, you can update your software at any time. And so that led to the birth of the Agile movement. And actually, Agile started at the tail end of that other waterfall movement, because even within waterfall, they're finding that you can't centrally plan out what software you want to build 3 years in advance. Marketers know this as well, right? When you do your annual planning, it only takes like 3 months for the annual plan to get out of date. The same is true for product people. And so Agile was a kind of reaction to waterfall development. It said, hey, instead of like developing these 3-year plans, we should be a lot more nimble. We should be a lot more iterative. And what we should do is we should actually ship little improvements to the product and see how users behave, look at the metrics, and then invest more incrementally into things. So instead of doing Windows 95 and 3 years waiting till Windows 98, what if Windows 95, it keeps getting better every single day? And so that's why they don't have Facebook 1 and Facebook 2 and Facebook 3. Facebook just keeps getting better with 1,000 little improvements every day. And that's the heart and essence of Agile.
Thank you so much for explaining it. I have a question just to satisfy my curiosity. When you ship something, what's the first actual thing you look at in the data?
So the first thing to do is when you ship something to not peek at the data. Full reality that if you start to look at the data before the predetermined time that in your product requirements document you said it would take, like, if you have expected 1 million visitors a week and you want to look at a 1% lift on a certain metric, you can calculate using statistics. Hey, this is how long it's going to take. It's going to take 1.5 weeks or whatever amount of time it is. So I don't peek at the data, actually. What I do peek at is what are user responses to this? So I would look at something like a telemetry of everybody clicking all the events. I want to make sure that there's any bugs that we missed. And then I also want to look at session replays. To see session replays, are there people getting clearly frustrated with the design? Many, many times, especially in this Agile world, we'll ship a feature, then we'll look at session replays from the first 24 hours and we'll realize, oh my gosh, we didn't realize like there's this simple UX issue here, there's this other UX issue here. And so we go and fix those in the first 24 hours or first 48 hours. And then we actually ship that new version. And so I'm actually looking less at the data, more looking at session replays and telemetry to make sure that people are doing everything we thought they were, because there's a huge gap between what you put in the PRD, what you create in Figma, and what actually ships to production.
That's a hot tip. So you have worked at Apollo and Affirm, very popular names. What were some of the most interesting things that you learned there?
So let's take them one by one. Let's start with the Affirm, because I was there first before Apollo. So as head of product growth, I was in a director role. So as a director of product, one of the first things I learned at Affirm is that my first team is no longer my product team. It's actually the executive team. And so that was a pretty big learning for me, is that, some of the most sought after, reliable, successful, well-reputed directors at a firm, they would go into an area and they'd say, we just need to cut this whole area. We shouldn't even focus on this part of the business. Whereas before I would come in with a mindset of, oh, hey, I'm director of product of the consumer app. That means the consumer app is the best thing ever. I need to sell it. I need to make sure that it does great. I need to make sure that our initiatives in the consumer app, people would think have an ROI. But actually, it might be better to you go in and say, I don't think we should even focus so much on the consumer app. Here's why. Right. And so that is one of the key lessons I had at Affirm. Your first team, once you hit that director VP level, is the exec team, not the team that, your name is product manager or director of product for the consumer app. So that's the very first thing. Second lesson I had from Affirm was the scientific method of planning. So at Affirm, they would estimate the impact of a feature that we wanted to ship that was on our roadmap to 9 significant digits. They would say, hey, this feature you want to ship in the consumer mobile app, let's say it's a simple feature. You want to add a new push notification that gets sent to 100,000 people every day. This is going to drive 9,987,643 and 12 cents of GMV and $1,422,438 and 5 cents in profit and so that was like a crazy amount of precision. And interestingly, product managers weren't even allowed to be part of that decision. So you would write all your PRDs and then some analysts would go run all the numbers and crunch all the numbers. And so it was a truly like scientific, objective process. There was no sort of, hey, the PM thinks it's a good idea, so let's just do it. So Apollo, my first key lesson was, whoa, product-led growth works. Like I had never been in a product-led growth engine quite like Affirm. Millions of free users, millions of people signing up every month for this product because it's just so good. Because it gives you 50 free contacts per month, right? You can't get this anywhere else. And there's so many good contacts in there. You can get their email or their phone number for free. And that would be this huge engine, this huge tailwind for the company. I think they released, right? Like from when I joined, we had like 10,000 paying customers to like 40,000 paying customers within like a year, like having like 200, 300, 400% ARR growth, even though they're already at 30, 40 million ARR, just crazy growth on the back of product-led growth in a way I had barely ever seen. It's like there's few cases like this, maybe like Slack, that have been as successful in the PLG motion as Apollo. Maybe some of these new companies like Lovable would just hit 40 million ARR in like a year, or Cursor or Bolt. Those are kind of the new wave, but Apollo was even before that. So that was one key lesson from Apollo. Second key lesson is how amazing and full stack a CEO can be. The CEO at Apollo, like literally this guy wrote most of the code for the app. He's also the best product manager. In any product review he comes in, he can give you this amazing feedback right away. He can go look at your roadmap for any team and immediately tell you, this will work, this won't work. I had rarely been with a guy who's like as fast. So like you send him something like 2-3 hours later, he's already completely processed it and digested it. And he understands all areas of the business from product to sales to customer success. So that was really seeing how behind a unicorn, there's typically a unicorn founder.
Great answer. I really love the number thing. That's crazy to think. I know marketers are gonna hate me for saying this, but not every launch needs fireworks and a landing page, right? So, how do you determine if a feature should be highlighted as a major release versus a quiet rollout?
Well, I think the first thing you want to think about is my ICP. What are the biggest things that my ICP holds as negative opinions about my product or that are encumbering me from winning a sale, right? And so if your ideal customer an enterprise buyer and your enterprise buyer is really concerned about your security and your SOC 2 compliance, if your team releases a huge marketing splash, right? On the other hand, if you're they worked on releasing some automation or some API integration, if it's not sort of a key barrier for your person to buy, then does it really make it? Because when you're in that specific moment, right, you only have a few messages you can give. And so you really want to keep it to the most important messages and you want to market the most important things. And so tactically, how I like to do this as a product manager is I like to have a really strong product marketing leader who I bring into the process very early on, even before we've decided what we're going to build, so I can get their feedback on what do you perceive as those marketable features. So a really good product leader in any given quarter or half, they will have several marketable features that they've already agreed with the experts in marketing. Hey, these are ones that we think are super important. So I think that's the key way to build this sort of flywheel of regularly having awesome launches that do deserve fireworks.
Got it. Give me a hot take about roadmaps.
Yeah, I think this used to be my most popular YouTube video. When I just started giving hot takes, ranting about roadmaps. And so a lot of people, they will think that, hey, dates and precise numbers and very specific features, you don't need those on roadmaps. So this is basically like the agile movement I explained, taken to its nth degree. They'll talk about we need to make our product managers empowered. All you want to do is you want to give them a goal metric and you want to give them these problems to solve. They shouldn't even tell you what solutions they're going to think about. I think that's false. And this goes back to one of those lessons we were talking about with Affirm. I think that once you actually go deeper beyond the problems and you look at the 3 different solutions for a given problem, they could have dramatically different financial impacts. And I'll give you an example, okay? So at Affirm, we wanted to improve the activation rate of people. And we said a problem is that they don't have the mobile app, okay? So one way to improve installation of the mobile app is to send them lots of emails about the mobile app. But if it's decreasing the impact on the email channel, it might have a negative impact because of those unsubscribes are getting an email from other positive emails. In comparison to the others, based on those financial impacts, and you're just empowering the team to let them go do it on their own, you're not going to bring that science to the process. You're not going to bring those other perspectives to the process. And so that's why I actually think it's important to empower the team to think about the right solutions. And so what you do is, as executives, you give them problems and metrics to go after, and then you ask them for the different solution options they suggest, but then you give them feedback on the solutions as well. And so that's my hot take on roadmaps, is that if you go through that process, then your roadmap should have solutions and it should have dates, because you should be precisely estimating these things down to 9 significant figures, including cost. You can have your technology lead estimate, this is going to take 3 engineers 5 weeks. You can have your design lead estimate, this is going to take 1 designer 1 week. And then you can take the cost of those people and then weigh it against the potential benefit.
That's incredible. That's amazing. What specific information do you need from marketing teams before planning product updates?
So marketing, I think, needs to be really involved with product teams. And so I think that the way I want to think about a product update is that it's actually like a joint effort, right? And so it's a joint effort with my product marketer to publish to the rest of the marketing team, to publish to customers, to publish to executives, to publish broadly to the public at large. And at the same time, what I want to do is I want to create the right cadences to then work with that product marketer. And so what I like to do is have like something like a product team meeting, which would be like the product manager, the designer, the engineer, and a product marketer who's coming in to understand this is the state of development, this is the state of planning, this is the state of prioritization and road mapping, and these are the things we want to build, and getting their feedback into that process as well, so that when we're getting their feedback, they can really act as coordinators with the rest of the marketing team around a product launch. So then marketing team might say, hey, this product launch, this one's really called enablement training. They can come through the product marketer to tell the product manager and the product team, hey, we need that. And then the team can plan to make that happen. And so the way to think about a product launch really succeeding, right? A product manager, they might want to have a website for every product launch. Product marketer comes in and says, okay, here's the reality. These are the ones that we really need. This is based on our resources. This is what's based on the market's actually going to want. And then the product team can provide the additional context of, oh, this is how the feature works. Here are some user conversations that we had that prove its benefit. Here are some metrics that we saw that we could potentially talk about. So that's how I think the relationship works best.
So, how far in advance do you typically brief the marketing team before the product launch? Like you said, it has to happen together. But in those times when it's not just happening, it's not a team effort, how far in,
If it's not a team effort, something's broken. But I think fundamentally, right, you need to think about, well, what do I need from the marketing team to make my product launch a success? And so if what I need from my marketing team is to create an amazing video, to engage 20 influencers to talk about it, to have a website page, to talk about it at our next upcoming conference, then I need to engage my marketing team 4 to 5 months in advance, right? That's how long it actually takes to build out all of those things. And so the way I like to think about it is, what does my feature need for success? What is the realistic time frame based on my marketing team that they need to deliver on those things? And so ideally, though, it's done together where the marketing team says, oh yeah, these are the things we need. We need to put it in the conference. We need to have this video. We need to do that. Now, the reality is sometimes you don't have 5 to 6 months. Sometimes the CEO decides on a feature and he wants to see it in the app next month. And in those cases, I think it's incumbent on product to bring marketing in as early as they can and say, for the success of this feature, given what the CEO wants, it would be good to have. I'm just learning about this. So know that there's a 20% chance he changes his mind anyways, but I'm bringing you in early so that we can plan if it continues.
So, what documentation do you provide to marketing teams to help them understand new features?
So the most important one personally for me is that product requirements document. And that's what I want to hand over to them. And I want that product requirements document to have a really clear rationale around why I believe the market wants it, how I believe we are positioning it for the market to receive it, how I believe these are specific user segments within our broader market that are going to use it. This is the metrics impact. This is the marketing support it needs. And so I think that putting all of those elements into a really strong product requirements document that ideally also has a Figma file attached so that they can see, okay, this is the product change. Here's what the goals were, is a great starting point. And I try to ask my marketing team, hey, we don't want to create specific materials for you. This product requirements document, it should work for design, engineering, marketing, executives, sales, everybody, so that the product management team is spending less time writing and more time actually building.
Got it. Let's talk about marketing actually influencing product. Could you share an example of when marketing insights directly changed your product direction?
All the time, but one of the most famous examples is when I was at ThreadUp. I was director of growth. I was actually leading the growth marketing teams as well. And what we learned is that we had this brand angle from the company. Hey, we're not a thrift store. We're a consignment store. We're a level above that, okay? We're not secondhand clothes. We're like new clothes. Okay, so we had this strong sort of blinders. But within growth marketing, we're spending money on Facebook and we're seeing that the best LTV to CAC ratio we can get on Facebook is calling ourselves the world's largest thrift store. And we see this and we say, okay, what if we change the product to be more like a thrift store? So very first thing is, as a product experience focused on consignment, we had this idea of price bands that were like $0 to $10, $10 to $20. Guess what? At the thrift store, you're thinking $5 to $10, right? So we narrowed the filters on our pricing page as an example. We looked at our algorithms for what types of prices of product were doing well. And when we had thrift store messaging, people were buying cheaper stuff. And so we started to elevate cheaper stuff. And then what we were accepting at our warehouses changed, where we started to accept more cheap stuff from different brands that maybe weren't like new and were secondhand. And so it's an example where you see what's working in marketing and then you change your entire business based on it.
That's an incredible example. Now, imagine marketers trying to really get what makes their PM tick. What's one thing marketing should never ask a PM?
They should ask a PM anything they want. I mean, PM shouldn't be sensitive and stuck up. Hey, don't ask me this. I can't. I think that the way this should be thought about is like, how can a marketer better work with a product manager, right? And what are the things that they should avoid peppering the product manager with when there might be other places they could get that information documented, or potentially the product manager is just too busy. And so there's some, you want to like respect people's time. So we all want to be good colleagues. So as a marketer, how do I do that with the product manager? The very first thing I would think about is that product managers generally overworked, generally too many meetings, generally too much work. But guess what? Same with marketers, right? So they're like you. Empathize with them just like you, that, hey, if you can avoid the ping, if I can find a document about it, if I can find it in the company wiki or the company Confluence, let me go ahead and do that. If I can message somebody other than the product manager, potentially it's a good idea. One thing that I found when I would work with marketers sometimes is I would think, oh, I can't message the designers and engineers working on something for me directly. I always have to go through the product manager. I said, no, if we've introduced you and they're working on it, then go direct to the source, right? Let's not play phone tag and reduce, 10% of the meaning and translation each time this gets bumped from one person to the next, right? Let's just have a direct connection. And so you don't always need to go through the product manager. At the same time, I'd also have scenarios where marketers might ask me something like, hey, what's the North Star for this experiment? But they were in the meeting a day ago where we reviewed the PRD. They have the link to the PRD. They can go back to that calendar invite where they find the PRD link, and then there they can see the North Star for a feature. So knowing where information should live and just being a very present and active and aware teammate and not pinging people for things you can find somewhere else. But that applies for all roles. It doesn't just apply from marketing to product management. So what applies specifically from marketers to product managers? I think what you tend to see is that marketers want to know, hey guys, when is this going to get released? What is the timeline? What's the update? We need to do this. We need to align these different things. And that's the final place I'll say, try to figure out what's the system of record where that information might live. So usually it's often Linear or Jira, and then go directly to the source for that. So that'd be my high level advice. But honestly, marketers have been great to work with as a product person.
But those are some great tips. I loved it. How should marketers make their requests to product teams to get prioritized?
So if you want to get prioritized, the very first thing is to realize that if you're not in a planning process or a quarterly road mapping process, it's going to be hard, right? If they've already committed to a plan with executives, they've socialized it with your customers potentially, then they're not going to be able to squeeze you in and push something else that they had committed to executives or customers out. And so that's the thing, is like, you want to time well. And really, often the product team will publicize, hey, we have our quarterly planning process coming up 4 weeks before the quarter ends. And what you want to do is you want to go back 2 to 3 weeks before that and come to them and say, hey, here's my pitch. And then the second thing you want to do is you want to have a pitch that isn't just a marketing lingo. So I got this often where people try to pitch me stuff, but it was, in the end, they didn't actually even need a product feature. And so it's worth thinking like, what is the engineering and design that I need? Is this really a product feature that I need, or do I need support from somewhere else? And then if you really do need a product feature or design, how much work can I do to prove that this product feature really needs to be built at the expense of whatever else they think should be built? And so you want to collect two types of things. The first is videos. Hey, we lost this deal because, hey, here's a recording from a gong call that shows them asking this. Hey, here's a support ticket that says that they're complaining about that. And then you want to quantify it as much as possible. It's applying to 10% of our users. It's applying to 30% of our open pipeline that has been closed lost, right? Quantify that. And then you want to bring more data insights as well. So, hey, people are currently trying to solve this problem in our product this way, but 70% of them are failing for that reason. This is equivalent to 60 million in ARR. As you can do that, where you bring data insights and user insights that are quantified, these two quantities, but different, one qualitative, one quantitative, you bring those to the picture, it's going to be so much more convincing. And then the final thing, I mentioned that impact sizing. So if you can understand, what is the cost going to be? How many designers and engineers is this going to take? And what's the revenue and profit going to be? And if you can quantify and then present that back to the team and say, hey, this is going to have a 3x ROI, then they can compare to the things that's going to have a 2x ROI and say, yeah, we should definitely do what marketing said.
Wow. So speak in numbers, show evidence, and compare.
Yes.
If a marketer listening wants to better understand their product team's priorities, what's one question they should ask their PM to spark a productive conversation?
What user problem are we trying to solve? At the heart of any good product roadmap and any good product person thinking, they're trying to solve key user problems. And most of the things on their roadmap will be aligned around one or two user problems. And so if you can identify, hey, these are the user problems, then naturally everything else should flow.
Amazing. So finally, we love ending with some love. One company that is doing great marketing right now.
Lovable. So I mentioned they're gone to 0 to 40 million ARR in less than a year. How have they done that from a marketing perspective? Founder-led marketing. So Antonin Osaka, he is appearing on podcasts. He's posting, building in public. So he's posting their ARR benchmarks, the people they're hiring, public hiring. So as he hires somebody, he's saying, hey, I got this cracked coder from here. Hey, can you recommend any cracked coders in Europe, right? And so they're bringing people along. And then finally, appearing with influencers. They just offered a free 1 year of Lovable with Lenny's newsletter. If you pay for an annual Lenny's newsletter, they appeared on Lenny's podcast. They collaborate with a bunch of other people. He appeared in interviews with Kyle Poyer in Growth in Reverse newsletter. And so I think all of those things come together to drive one of the fastest growing companies of all time.
Completely agree. This has been such a great conversation, Akash. Thank you so much for finding the time to do this.
Thanks for having me.
I have been your fan for like years now, and I'm so grateful that you could do this. If there are any marketers wanting to get into product management, tune into Akash's channel. He's doing such amazing work to help product people. And Akash, I have a million more questions already, and I hope I can bug you again soon.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Akash.
For sure.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
If you found this episode helpful, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button on YouTube and drop a rating on Spotify. It really helps more marketers discover these expert insights. For episode updates and even more marketing wisdom, follow the Who Invited Marketing page on LinkedIn. And hey, if you have any guest suggestions or topics you'd like to hear more about, let me know in the comments or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in to Who Invited Marketing. I'll see you in the next episode.